Hi, and welcome back to this week's podcast, News from the Real World, where we talk about 10 different articles. I am Jeremy. I am a second-year technical direction grad.
I'm Allie. I'm a second-year SMPM grad.
I'm John. I'm a second-year lighting design grad.
I'm Damien. I'm a second-year costume design grad.
And I'm Jessica. I'm a second-year costume design grad.
Starting off, we have Allie with an interesting article about electronics.
Yeah, so just this fun little thing on Gizmodo.com by Raul Alexander Marrero about this warehouse in New York City called E-Waste Warehouse that it serves a couple of functions, basically. It is a place where people can recycle their old gadgets and then people who are set designing or prop designing shows and movies come there and they rent out stuff. And it also helps keep the toxic chemicals that are in these products away from landfills. So it's a really, really great place. The people who work there, the recycle technicians, are so much fun, and they clearly love their job. And they also say how cool it is that it's, and this place is giant. Like they said, I forgot the number that they said in the video, but like they have so many pieces of equipment and electronics. And they said the other thing that's really cool about what they do is that you get to like see the history of electronics.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And like it's for a good reason, and you know, it's helping people. It's like pushing people to actually recycle because they know that it's like going to a good place and it's then going to be.
That's a key point because like me and my dad we have a bunch of old televisions just from every time we move. It's like a different time, different electronic zone, so we'd have to like get a whole bunch of stuff. But we have them and we can't use them, but like we can't throw them away. But like to know that they also take recyclables is really great. Cause you're kind of like, what am I going to do with
Well, also, like looking at some of the photos of the warehouse and stuff, it also looks kind of like what you'd envision, like your grandpa's garage of
secret treasure.
Secret treasure of just like they have all this stuff laying around and a lot of donations from that, but it's like some grandpas with some large collections got together and just said, "Hey, let's just put it here."
Yeah.
It's nice.
Make it available is nice.
It's nice to see a spotlight on something that, you know, because I feel like the entertainment industry has always been regarded as a high waste industry, like both theater, TV, and film. So it's nice to know that they're putting a highlight on places like this, because I'm sure that there are certain people who are hearing about this place for the first time, so it's gonna increase the use of the reuse of some of these items.
It also shows like a really specific aspect to like what we do as designers and like collecting these like everyone's like, oh, you're such a hoarder, and you're like, no, because like if you find something that's good, you want to keep it, and like you don't know really where to go and get it, but like to know that this is available is like such a cool resource, and it's like great that somebody saw a niche in the market of this industry and was like, you know what, like I'm gonna just start collecting all these things and people can rent them from me.
Well, and like I think the one thing that we struggle with in our industry is we like to collect things. We don't like to get we don't like to get rid of things. But this allows us to be able to get rid of the things so that they have a life beyond just sitting in our warehouse for that one occasional production.
Yeah.
It's a resource that you can then go to and borrow for when you need it, but it's not taking up space in your space.
And these
so it makes it more useful, gets more use out of it.
Yeah.
And
they become mini museums too, in like their own way.
And they even said that like they provide a lot of stuff to museums where they're like tracking like the history and technology and stuff. And it must be like this must take up a lot of space. I found the numbers, 2,000 vintage items, which is a lot. And if you think of New York City, you don't think that like there's this one building that could house that many, but it's got to be worth it. Like whatever rent they're paying, the fact that other places don't have to have as large of a prop and set like inventory.
Or they don't have to have much of an inventory at all.
Exactly, they can just come here and get it. Which is
the one thing I don't. It's in the where is it? Does it say where the warehouse was? Because
where it was,
or it is, because that's one thing I would be concerned about is like if they get hit by a storm, flooding area, anything like that with a big electronics store, because all those warehouses tend to be in the cheaper, more floodplain area.
And
flood prone. Sorry.
It's in the Lower East Side, but it doesn't say where exactly. Yeah. But my other question was, I was reading and like thinking about this. It's like, do those technicians, like if something breaks on set, and we're talking about like a more antiquated like piece of equipment, you're not going to necessarily have electricians that know how to do that. Maybe, but like if that breaks, like are you providing tech support? Like,
I guess it
that was
also
just another question.
it probably also
depends on
depends
the contract that you probably write up.
Right,
Well,
yeah, I just
Or
wondered.
if they're visual pieces or if they're usable pieces.
Okay.
Well, it probably just also depends on where they're filming.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they could probably find a technician, or I'm sure that there are people that
Locally,
would be,
if you're somewhere else. Yeah.
yeah.
But,
So
so yeah,
cool.
just a cool little place. Check it out if you're there and you want to look at 2,000 different electrical pieces.
Sounds like
Moving on to a slightly other cool aspect. This article on Variety, is it time for the Oscars to add a stunt category?
Absolutely.
By Zoe Hewitt.
And they shouldn't marginalize the award to the commercials like they did with everybody else.
This is just a commentary on the whole issue of stunt work, really, and how stunt coordinators don't really want to be called coordinators. They want to be called, what was the phrase they used in here? There's a, I'll find it eventually in here. And that the issue comes down to the studios not wanting to admit a lot of the times that the actors are not doing their own stunts, because if you start having an award for stunt work, then you're saying, okay, well, this is this person playing it.
You're
Right.
pulling back
Right?
the curtain.
You're pulling back the curtain a little
Which
bit.
is-
How
but
dare
I
you?
think
Ridiculous.
people are intelligent enough to know that most actors are not doing their own stunt work
Well,
because the stunt
I
is
think they're
so
also
insane.
slightly afraid of, okay, well, this stunt person's work is becoming so well known that they're then going to negotiate for more money to do the stunt work because
They
they're.
should,
Wait,
though.
they should be
So
getting
Right?
money.
dangerous.
Yeah,
They
but-
should be the highest paid
I think
people on
it's
set.
the productions are afraid of
Because it's the most risk.
Yes.
more bargaining power being given to other people. I think.
right, but in this situation, we're not honoring the people doing the stunts. They're talking about awarding
the
the people that are
people who
like the
coordinate
coordinator.
That
right?
coordinate, yes, but also a lot of the
Right.
instances that it says here, the coordinators are also
The stunt.
involved in the stunt work
Right,
itself.
right. No, yeah.
So they're worried about it being a double-edged sword.
I kind of see it as a double-edged sword, and just in terms of like I
I
don't know
think
if
it's a
I
bad thing.
Huh?
I don't think it's a bad
No, I don't
thing.
think it's a bad thing either. I'm not sure about necessarily awarding an Oscar. Like I believe that yes, they should be recognized in some form or aspect. But the thing about the only reason I say that is because at what point, like if we're gonna award, say, stunt choreographer or stunt coordinators, when are we gonna start honoring choreographers when
I was
there are
literally
like
just
film
Googling
musicals?
that.
Like we
Oh,
don't
Googling
we
that.
don't. I mean, there are so many other things that I feel like I mean, to me, like there's just so many other elements, and like there does have to come a point where you're recognizing how
Well,
crucial
actually,
is this to the film.
So it was Best Dance Direction was a Oscar category, and it was discontinued. And there's actually, I think it says 7 discontinued categories.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So-
the
Right.
actual phrase that stunt coordinators would prefer to be talked about is action designer.
Right.
So designing of the action.
Yeah, but then at that point, it's like you start getting
very
into like
amalgamous.
where is the film
Direction
editing and
versus-
like all of
Or
like,
where
One of
does
the other-
design
yeah,
stop?
one
Yeah.
of the
right,
other
where is that line?
discontinued
Because
is
it's at the same time, like
engineering.
just how like the companies don't want the actors or the audiences to know that they didn't do their own stunts. It's like we also like are we gonna have to like how do we know
Well, we
what's
do have a
CGI
best
versus
special-
what was actual? Like I mean I'm sure that there's a way to know.
Well,
if
we do have a Best Special Effects
Yeah,
award,
there's
so
a
I think
special award.
it's like one of those things where it's like if we have that conversation, or if they want to have that conversation, they should like break down what these people do. If there's a department, they have department heads. Similar to costume design, because the costume designer gets the award, but maybe that costume designer is not even physically sewing any of the clothes. So I think it has parallels to other parts of the industry.
Yeah. And jumping off of what you were saying, I mean, I agree, but I don't think that's a reason to not include this category. I think it's a reason to include that and, you know what I mean, like, and build.
Well,
And like because and I don't know that this is the reason because you said it was a category. it used to be a category for choreography. I think that, like, if you look at classical Hollywood, they had many more, like, this is a musical, and that kind of went away for a little bit. And now it seems like it's coming back. We have, like, more movies that are musicals with actual choreography, not just direction and blocking and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So that could come back as well.
I mean, I think what could potentially happen, and I thought of it here first if no one else has said it, but I think that, you know how like the Emmys have the creative Emmys, but those aren't really televised, but they are awards that are given. I feel like it's maybe time for the Oscars to start doing that.
Another whole
just
category.
A whole nother like set of awards.
I would love to see that televised too. So we should televise those things because it's like.
I think they deserve recognition, like publicly though.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just. Yeah.
Well, if the industry is going to continue and expand, why not have these conversations and do that? Or like, you know.
I mean, it's really if the industry decides to continue to recognize people who are doing good work.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes down to money. It all comes down to money in terms, like, you know, televising things like this are incredibly expensive, and when you're thinking about the entire theatrical aspect of it, and to be completely honest, I mean, I don't watch all award shows, so, and even if I work in this industry, like, I'm assuming that viewership for some of the smaller award shows isn't very high.
And like, there's a big thing with, you know, the walking of the red carpet is a big part of it,
right?
And not, you know, being very blanket statement about it, you know. Who's going to want to watch, you know, the costume designer walk down the red carpet versus their favorite actor?
Right.
Or who's going to want to watch the line designer walk down the carpet versus their favorite actor?
Yeah.
Well,
it's definitely the front of house and the back of house
correct,
in these situations. But I think having recognition for the back of house is very important as we glorify the front of house, because for every actor, there's 17 people behind the stage, making them look amazing, lighting them, dressing them, making sure they know where they stand, etc.
Right.
We put too much emphasis on the actor, I think, to carry a film, and it could be about the whole. It could just be a shift in consciousness about the industry.
Well, you said that this was on the part of the producers that they didn't want to.
Well,
recognize
that's a point of theorized resistance.
I feel like if you ask the actors, they're going to have a very different opinion.
I mean,
they
every
are
actor
very
that
close
is
to their
interviewed about their stunt people, they're like, it's the closest relationship sometimes.
So, like,
it's like
the fact that they're like, oh, well, we're protecting the actors is kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
Right.
Speaking about the actors, you have an article that talks about, right?
I do. It's from theconversation.com, and it's actors at all levels face pressure to change their appearance, not just stars like Doctor Who's Jodie Whittaker. And it was written by Sarah Reimers, and I think it's actually a very well-written article. It covers the shades of gray really nicely, and it's sort of talking about how actors in general are asked to change their appearance, and they either feel pressure from outside, like producers or that kind of stuff, to the, like, very specifically to being asked to change things, to the larger scale of like social pressures to like update themselves, for lack of better explanation.
Keep with
to
the
that.
times.
Keep with the times, like, you know, get a little nip and tuck. And sort of talks about the aesthetic labor clause that sort of goes into specific jobs, everything from like baristas and flight attendants to actors, and because the actors, she used a really nice phrase here that was something, I'll probably find it, but you're like maintaining and working on your appearance goes into the aesthetic labor of your work, because your job as an actor, it not just involves your your physicality is involved in the work.
Yeah, but that's not aesthetics.
See, one thing I found interesting, very interesting and surprising about it is the fact that the title of the article is not just stars like Doctor Who's Jodie Whittaker. They're using the show name to keep people into reading the article mostly.
Yeah.
Not essentially the issue.
It was very specific, like
Yeah.
weirdly
But
using her as a door open to this.
Yeah,
but
because especially in the introduction of her talking about it, it's like earlier in her career it was asked, not necessarily of her right now in that role in Doctor Who. If it had been in that role, then I think it would have been more applicable to have in the title of the article.
Yeah.
Because like I was like, ooh, maybe a little during Doctor Who when I was reading it, but then I was like, oh, okay, Doctor Who.
It's literally just
it's so fine, yeah.
Yeah, I did a little research around this too, because I was looking at like there's like a notorious whispers about like a 5-pound clause in most contracts for like models or actors and that kind of stuff. And if you just Google a weight clause for contracts, there's also things that come up for like professional athletes and that kind of stuff. And I think that it's like just a very, if you're looking at it as like a grand scheme of things, like it's very interesting that these requirements go into specific job types, but it's everywhere from like safety regulations for like flight attendants through like the aesthetic requirements. And I think like when I was an actor, it was very clear, it made very clear to me that nails needed to always be nicely done, hair needed to be maintained, that kind of stuff. Like, but it also made very clear to me I needed to be of a specific like weight class as well. And I think that those are two different conversations sometimes, but highly interrelated. But like, it's like one thing is like as an actor, being like aware of your physical appearance is important, but like perhaps like you don't need to stay within a weight class in order to, and it goes back to that article that we were talking about like fat shaming in the industry and that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting. I think it's a large, really fascinating conversation that constantly should be talked about. But
I will say that
it was good.
One of the things that I was like, the only part of the article, there was one phrase where it was comparing, like, for example, Kit Harington growing his beard out in Game of Thrones to weight gain. Though, like, I understand it's an appearance thing, like, I feel like those are completely different entities. Like, I was a little bothered by that comparison because I was like, I don't see those as being the same
for a role versus like being told that you need to be of a specific weight type.
But yeah, and I mean, like, I think like one important thing though in terms of like maintaining weight through a production, I understand it for the sake of continuity. Like, if somebody like because we all that's what I meant. Like because which I'm assuming that in some cases that's why.
That is a concern.
Like, if you're filming a movie and you're filming it out of sequence, as you do most of the time, it's like some people, like, when they gain 5 pounds, it's very noticeable in their face, or it's very noticeable, and it's like, if you're going to be doing that in a film, then you do start running into bigger issues.
I mean, the harsh reality is that if you're using your body to tell a story, that there will always be judgment thrown onto it, and that is part of the industry, but that doesn't mean that we can't be conscious about how we approach those conversations and how we take into account, like, the social pressures that we're saying these things, and, like, making sure that we're not saying something like rude. It's like, the 5-pound clause could be something, that is a very rude thing, because it's like you could get fired over gaining 5 pounds. But like if you're saying like a conversation about continuity, that's an important conversation to have with sensitivity.
Well, I mean, and not even just with the film industry, but with the theater industry. I know there's some summer stocks out there that have appearance clauses where you are only allowed, like, you cannot alter your appearance without prior approvals. Like, you can't go get your hair cut, you can't go tanning, you can't go, you'd be mindful of all those things.
Right. I mean,
as long as you are on contract.
Right. That kind of falls into our wheelhouse too, though, in terms, like, when we're costuming people, like, we can't, haircuts were very specific to time periods, and like a lot of the times, at least with me,
or if like women of color, like you have to be very conscious about what you're requesting.
But like with men and women, it's like, because there are such specifications with hair, like we do have to have that conversation very early on, like don't grow your hair out, don't get a haircut until we discuss what we're going to do.
Start growing a beard now, please, or if like you can't, or if it's something like that, like we have a conversation about it.
So I think there's, it's definitely a double-sided coin of like this issue as a whole.
Well, your body is your canvas as an actor, and you do have to be aware that that's a tool that that people are also looking at. And
I mean, all of our product is entirely based on appearances. I mean, like, it's art, but like in terms of like film and TV, like it's all visual. We're all looking at it. We have to, there has to be a certain aesthetic. There has to be a certain just like the reference to Olivia Colman gaining weight for the role that she just won an Oscar for. Like, would it have been as impressive? Because I mean, in that film, the fact that she is in a period gowns and slightly larger, like that's part of the story. So
and
it's part of who Anne was.
And when you go to the story, that I think that is a different thing, and like that calls for it, and then I think it gets so
then the question too becomes, why did we choose this actress? and have her gain weight versus picking an actress of that weight class to play this character. But you know, that also comes down again to like casting and the general conversation, but also like if you know, maybe it was just that actress, that specific actress was the choice, and everything else around it is sort of molded like clay.
But about performers, Damien has
Performers.
Jimmy, you're on fire.
Are we talking about the
exit theater.
the exit theater? So essentially what happened is this is an article titled "Exit Theater Cancels Show After U.S. Immigration Blocks Canadian Performer." And it was written by Nastya Voinovskaya. So what happened is Exit Theater Company in the U.S. Was putting on a show titled Crippled, which is by playwright Paul David Power, or I think he might be like a playwright actor situation. Never really clarifies. But what ended up happening is they slated the show into their season in San Francisco at Exit Theater, and the actor / playwright was actually denied permission to come into the U.S. because, to quote from the article, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services stated that he was denied permission to perform in the U.S. on the basis that Crippled is not culturally unique. The play deals with a man with disability who is suffering from the loss of his partner, and he was denied because it's not culturally unique. And so the big argument in this article is, why is it that these government institutions have the ability to decide what is culturally unique? And they tried to file they're filing appeal, or they tried to file an appeal to allow them to bring the actor in, but they were told no. And so it just caused quite a bit of a shakeup because that's a performance that had to get canceled. And they're fighting for like legitimate reasons, and the arguments being made that for example in Canada, like it's a lot easier for actors and shows to travel into Canada, but like we have such strict regulations, and so.
And it's interesting because this article actually falls into something that we kind of touched on in theater management today,
right?
About immigration has to determine if there is anybody in the U.S. that could possibly fill that role. Then they have to not allow that person in to work on that show.
Right.
So if so being crippled is not. They're saying being crippled is not enough to say that this Canadian cripple is the only person that can fill this role. There are crippled Americans that can fill this role. Is what they're essentially saying by refusing this.
Right.
Whereas there's another production that who's that brought it up in class? Someone brought it up in class where. There's a bunch of people, or it's about a bunch of countries that are all denied or blacklisted immigration to the U.S. right now, but all the actors are from those countries, and they've been able to get in because they specifically have to be from that country to fill the role.
Right.
And I will say it does kind of, it doesn't go both ways completely, but it does kind of, because there was a time not long ago where I was looking to see if I could work in Canada as a stage manager, and basically you have to prove the same thing. You have to prove that they do not have anyone else who is Canadian who could be a stage manager. And you're like, so it is tricky. I think this is ridiculous, especially because it takes into account the artistic vision and
and he's the
relevance,
writer.
and you have to justify your art to
there's another layer here. It's not somebody just hiring somebody from a company.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's
But I mean that's probably the level that the government's looking at it, because that's their metric that they have to go by.
Right. And for this though, I think we're specifically talking about one-time performances, not coming in, right? Because you mentioned the stage management thing. If you were looking to work there, and this is a question that I'm curious about, if you're looking to work there full time, right? Is there the opportunity for you to just it's a much longer process, but getting dual citizenship or going in on a work visa? I don't know what the possibilities are, but I feel like those are different compared to what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, I know one of our professors from Canada. They were here on a special visa to teach here at school, and then they finally were able to get I think it was a green card to be able to actually work here outside of that work visa.
Yeah.
So they had to do a whole huge process that took almost a couple of years to
Yep.
finish so that they could actually design
Yeah.
here in the U.S. just to be able to have that opportunity. So it is a lengthy process to be able to do that.
I mean, this is definitely something that I'm interested in exploring more, simply because, like, very recently I've just had the interest to go work in Mexico, you know,
Yeah.
with just so much great film and stuff coming out of there that I know the language, let me go. But yeah, it's something that I genuinely have to think about and figure out how that happens. And it just sucks that, you know, these circumstances, I mean, I feel bad for the theater. Because I've worked in a theater before where you have to cancel a performance or you have to completely change a production, and it's hard.
I think this is a major fight for plan as far ahead as possible.
Right.
Because the closer you are to that time that you have to cancel, it makes it that much harder and more
Yeah.
impactful on everyone.
That was also part of the article, though, is that they planned this a while ago, but the denial letter didn't come until very last minute, and it was like, well,
Well, you know,
they
with
didn't
the
have-
government shutdown, things
Right.
can happen.
Right.
Anyways, changing to a slightly different note there. Allie has an article here.
Oh, yeah. So, a little bit more uncomfortable. Although it shouldn't be, because that's part of the article. Anyway, Nudity in the Theater. The actors of Linda Vista have it covered. By Jessica Gelt on LA Times. So,
They have it covered.
yeah, I got it. That was it. Yep. So they actually
Oh, God.
don't. I mean, they do. Anyway, we'll talk about it. It is Tracy Let's Play, Linda Vista, that is playing, and in it, 3 actors get naked, and not just like a little naked, like very, and like
Very.
have sex. And
Do they actually have sex?
yes,
Mm-hmm.
Wait, no, it's like staged.
It-
Or
Wait,
did
I
it-
didn't
it
understand
is
that.
staged sex scenes.
Yes.
But but like it actually realized. I couldn't understand.
I'm
I don't
not.
think
I'm not
so.
gonna. Yeah, I don't.
think
They
so.
didn't say anywhere in
No.
the article. They did not specify what the detailed
To what level.
action. Right.
Right.
Okay.
They specified that the one girl does, like, masturbate on
Masturbate,
stage.
right.
So like, unclear
Yeah,
as
because that's
to
where
the
I was
level
like,
of detail.
okay.
No, I don't
Unclear.
believe they're actually having sex.
Well, so
If you're
I have a
masturbating on
story. Anyway,
stage.
so no, because it relates to something that anyway.
Okay.
So, and they talk about how basically the importance of this is that the audience on a nightly basis feels very taken aback by this, and the actors talked with their director and their intimacy and consultant.
They had one. Yay.
They did. No, they totally did. Oh, they totally did. She has done 6 plays in less than a year, a testament to the rising profile of the field in the wake of Me Too, which is great. I'm glad to see that this position is becoming more of a thing. And it's the same thing. We've talked about this in like other articles, like the language
It's becoming a
surrounding it.
requirement
That,
nowadays,
Right.
oh yeah, but like the language that she uses surrounding what is happening is very specific.
Yep.
And like they talk about like bony landmarks instead of, and there's no like slang in referring to any body part. It's like, so
That's
it's
great.
Yeah, and the actors talk about how in the beginning, why does this keep happening? How in the beginning, like they sat down, they had a conversation, they were very clear as to what was okay and what was not. And they say that like the actors say that they feel when the audience reacts like that, they are, what is that, in a very they didn't say safe. What was the word she used? I can't. No, it was up further, I feel. No, it wasn't that. Anyway, no. The one actor says that it's she feels like they're in the arms of a very beautiful show, like that they're very taken care of, basically. I had some questions about this. So when I was in undergrad, I went to go see a production, and the beginning of the show, like you're in a blackout, and my professor was the one who was directing. He was directing outside of school. And he directed the show, and it was a very good show. But in the blackout, before you start the show, you hear sounds. And then the lights come up, and the actors are having sex.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, oh! And I remember...
No audience warning.
I remember, well, and that's the other thing, that they had to be very clear, and they said that, like, people were even missing the warnings on their website, so they started putting it in, like, the ads, that, like, what exactly was happening. But, in that production, it was very weird because I remember being taken aback, because I was an undergrad, it was, like, what, 20, you know, like, 19, you're like, what? And you don't expect that at the very beginning of a show. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking about it with classmates afterwards who had also gone to see that, and they're like, oh, it's okay, they're married in real life. And I was like, that's not the...
You're like, it's not like it's not
I didn't go in agreeing to see this.
What?
Yeah.
Well, there's like, what's the level between watching art and watching like a variety show, and like making sure that like the nudity helps tell the story, but also like in theater, is it really necessary to have an actor masturbate on stage?
Well, he talks about the emotional vulnerability,
where it gets very confusing too. Where you're like, am I watching somebody?
I mean, I think this specific article though, I personally thought it was a very good article of highlighting a theater doing it correctly.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it you know, from the conversations with the intimacy director and the actors, to the fact that the actors are clearly very comfortable doing this, and it's because of the approach that the theater took. It explicitly says that the theater does have trigger warnings.
Yes.
And then they upped it because it wasn't
right. I mean, and
yet.
this is an example of a theater doing it correctly.
Yeah.
And I think it repeats on several different occasions that like it is important to the show. Mm-hmm. I've had three experiences with nudity in theater. One of them, the show started with a sex scene, and it was a sex scene between two men. Mm-hmm. And then there were 10 minutes of full frontal nudity with one of the actors. But, it did add the whole show was based on reality. It was, so it made complete sense. And I think, because I was working at the theater, there were maybe like one or two walkouts. There weren't any, because of, again, it was done well, it was done artistically, and the show itself, it was relevant to the story. That being said, my first experience with nudity in theater was also in undergrad. I can't honestly remember if there were trigger warnings, but I mean, working in a costume shop, I knew that there was nudity.
Yeah.
In that case, though, I will say it was a completely different ballgame, because the awkwardness of it was the fact that I was seeing two of my peers. And so that's a whole nother level of like, so I can't really comment on but I just think that this is a good article that shows the proper way to approach this.
Oh, for sure. And I think they did do it really well. Like, I did like everything that they said in this, and like bringing her on, and their comfort level.
Comfortability. Comfort level.
I do think the thing for me was that, and they touched on this too, is like it's in the writing. Right. Like if it's written such that this is completely gratuitous, even if you have done the entire process completely right, like I think you should have a better story. But for something like this where it does seem like it's very integral, that's good.
But speaking of pushing the limits, though, John has an article here.
Yeah, we're back with digital effects and virtual reality.
Yeah.
Again.
Woohoo. 8 artists
it's not going to go away anytime soon.
I think the reoccurring theme on multiple weeks of this means it's continuing to push the bounds of it. And it goes over a few different artists here. And
some really cool work. Really interesting work.
Intriguing work on how they're approaching, some of them how they approach how it connects with the humanity and like how humans interact and things like that in multiple different ways and bounds throughout each one of them. And it gives a bunch of examples of the different art. It gives the artists in a couple of their examples. Let me see, the one of them that stood out. There's one where they're talking about the division between subject, object, and body and how it's blurring with how CGI is being rendered and the ethics behind it. their series was called Rake, featuring a series of CGI rendered women in a sterile virtual studio space, and just like they were just there, and just like the way that they're continuing to get forward and move, and then it talks about them getting commissioned for other work that are similar to it. The same artist, so the artist that did that one, where'd their name go? Kate Cooper. Yeah, Kate Cooper's Rig, and getting other work elsewhere. And then it says we encounter, you got commissioned for the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. We encounter another female computer-generated avatar, this time wearing a translucent suit, continuously inflating and deflating. I mean, that and it's like, for me, I think of that, I'm just like, it approaches so many different realms of how we view ourselves and how others are viewed, and how we then judge those people, like in a lot of the topics we've talked about, but then being able to virtually do that and show how that changes.
Well, I also think
just the one article. I mean, there's more,
Right.
not one article, but one of the artists that's listed here, with many more.
And I think we're at the point with this now where people have played around with it enough. That they have learned how it works, and now we're really starting to see people establish what this can be and what the quality can be.
Right.
You know, so pushing for that quality, pushing forward in it now that we understand it to an extent, and can start understanding how people interact with it, and continue to push that and drive that forward now.
Well, it's really intriguing on this specific one. It also talks about after, with its inflating and deflating, as the avatar begins to get sick, bruised, and bleed, Cooper confronts us how we perceive digital bodies as beyond mortality and thus beyond care. And what does that then teach us and teach others about how we treat a human body?
Well, because we've been taught in video games,
Right.
it's just a thing. It's not a person.
It's not a person.
It's
You just
disembodied.
you have another life. Yeah.
I will say it's nice putting a highlight on something that I think is going to start creeping its way into, pretty regularly. I mean, but especially with what we do. I mean, it's already starting. It's already, and my big question is, how is that going to start impacting us as artists? In terms of, how is the stage manager going to handle something like that? Or, us with costume design, are we going to be part of the design conversation for these characters that are being created virtually?
I know the designer that has worked with as a
Right,
consultant
for video games, yeah.
and that kind of thing.
And
So
they're-
it'd be cool to see where that expands into,
Right.
or
And
if
they're-
people think they have a need for it.
And they're usually consultants too, on animated films. I know for a fact where people, are there to describe. Oh no, the fabric, it would be this, and
It moves
So-
like this,
right.
or
so. I mean, because I think even something like Moana, I think had a costume designer. So just stuff like that. So I'm sure it'll start making its way into virtual reality.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes.
On another note, moving away from that, about special effects, there's a nice little production notes blog from NevadaFilm.com about Haze machines, and more importantly, what are Haze machines and how they are different from fog machines.
so specific.
So specific.
It matters.
It matters. There's a quick little write-up about the differences and the different fluids used in each one, oil or water, and lists 3 different, subsets of major differences beyond. So, first being the effect and how it's produced. Haze machine usually being less obtrusive, fog being more billow effect. And so, it's more looking at the different scenarios where you would want to use that. And then also looking at the affordability. Fog machines tend to be more affordable than hazers, because hazers are actually breaking it down, the fluid, atomizing it so it suspends in the air better. And such. So, yeah.
Fog machines are actually vapor, right? That's what I read, or did I misread that?
Sorry, what?
With fog machines, that's a bigger difference. Is that?
Yeah,
the
fog
machines
machines,
are actual vapor, right?
they vaporize the liquid.
Right.
So they use a heating element in order
Right.
to vaporize it into the air.
Yeah.
And that's why it usually disperses, because they're usually larger particles that either fall out of the air. And then haze machines are atomizing it using
Right.
pressure to break
Yeah.
it up so it suspends in the air.
As a costume designer, when I first of all, I did not realize that some hazers are oil. That to me, I was like,
They are.
I mean, I know that
Well, the thing with the oil versus water, a lot of them used to be oil.
Right.
Not as many of them are oil now
Right.
because
Changing
they've gotten it
Because
leaves
it's
residue
flammable,
all
right?
over the stage. It
Right.
can, and then also it's not that great for you to have that sitting in your lungs.
Breathe it,
Right.
Yeah.
So Actors
Yeah.
Equity has pushed that away
Exactly.
pretty
Yeah.
heavily.
Anytime, because usually it's lighting cues the ones dictating the haze or fog.
Right.
And so like people come up, it's like, no, we have water-based haze.
Yeah,
And fog.
exactly.
It's water-based. We're fine. You're
Yeah.
fine.
In the equity
It's okay.
contract, you
Does
cannot
that-
have certain types of haze and
Oh, really?
yeah, like you can't
Oh.
have it because it's harmful.
Interesting. Does that affect the type of lighting that you do? Like
Not
the
really.
haze itself?
The difference
or-
between
The
water-based
oil
and
versus
oil-
water is-
if it did, I haven't really worked with oil as much because it's gone so far out. If it did have a difference, it's
not enough.
It's not worth it to have that type
Correct.
of.
Right.
Yeah, that really
Regardless of what
smells.
coats on the stage,
Yeah.
for me, it's like, let's just mop it. But like the lungs themselves,
The health issues there
the health
is
issues are the
really
biggest
what
issue.
is the overriding
that's the biggest
determination
issue, and
there.
I'd rather have something that's health friendly
Right.
Yeah.
to use.
Let's be
All
good
comes
to
down
our
to health.
actors.
But
Yeah.
health
Oh,
article.
Speaking of toxicity, yeah, right.
Oh,
I'm
that
gonna
was nice.
talk super quick about this one, but basically, this article is from the Guild of Scenic Artists, and it's called "Painting While Pregnant," and it's written by Rebecca M. Burton. And my only comment about this is that really read your MSDS reports on all of your
Always.
toxicity, anything that you are working with.
Well, also
Yeah.
just there are enough alternatives out there that a lot of the things, exposure limits is what it comes down to, is those few instances that you need to use it, you don't,
Do you really need
order
to
them
use it?
in if
Yeah.
you have to. Only stock what you barely need, and you shouldn't have it hanging around anyways.
Yeah.
There's enough non-toxic versions of these things that you're trying to work with out there nowadays that you shouldn't need them there.
And also, I think, like, it goes maybe with saying, like, always have an advocate for yourself, especially if you're pregnant and, like, you're still working. Like, I mean, I have
Yeah.
not experienced this, but I'm sure other people have out there. But, like, if you feel like it's not safe, like, say something, don't do it, talk to your supervisor. But also, like, a lot of this, too, talk to your doctor. But I think some of the notes in here, like, are very specific about pregnancy, but also, like, in general, educate yourself about what you're using. Like you said, there are other alternatives that you can be working with. And does, using the toxic product really get you what you want to, like, find or what you're looking for?
And especially at a lot of the jobs that you'll be working at, there is usually a safety officer or someone that is
Right.
chiefed with the.
But it also goes for
Maybe
like things like in the
mindset of
costume shop
safety.
too. Like even just like that foam cut, not foam, but the rubber cutting mat that has chemicals in it that are like have been proven to cause birth defects, and it is illegal in the state of California. If it's illegal in the state of California and you're doing something with it, like maybe don't use it if you're pregnant. Like those cutting mats, like if I was pregnant, I technically couldn't be using those cutting mats, but we use them a lot in cutting fabric or making patterns and that kind of stuff. So being aware of all of the things for every department.
Well, reading this article, though, for me, it raised the question of, when your livelihood is based around, like, a scenic artist, like a pregnant scenic artist, if that's what they do for a living, all of a sudden, because they're pregnant, they're not able to do their job anymore. So I think it definitely raises a bigger question in terms of where we are in the U.S. with, like, maternity leave and, like, what kind of things we offer for
Yeah.
mothers. So,
But even like
yeah.
being pregnant isn't even just about maternity leave. It's also about like gestating this human inside of you.
Well, I mean,
And,
that's what I meant. Like
being
maternity
safe.
leave
Yeah.
being
Encompassing the
spectrum
full
of the-
development.
right,
time,
the gestation period
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, not necessarily just the post.
Yeah.
And probably because of time, this might be our last article, but about color
Hell
and painting.
yes.
'Cause I feel it's going to be a
One
little bit.
article I wanted to talk
I'm
about.
so excited. I'm so excited.
I love this article.
Oh my God.
I think the
Well,
last,
let's see.
the last color we talked about was that
It was
blue.
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 Yeah.
Yep.
What was the
The
blue?
lapis lazuli blue.
And now we have orange, and it's talking about
Let's talk about
how
this.
orange works
Jess is
in our
here for
history and
this.
everything like this.
I love
And
this.
what's great is it kind of goes through the article, which is on mymodernmet.com, and it's written by Jessica Stewart. it goes over kind of like this, a little bit of the history of orange and where it comes from. And like for a long time, orange didn't have a name. It was called yellow red. And it wasn't until the orange tree was brought over that they all started calling it orange.
Because that tree is the one that transcends multiple languages, which I love.
Which is great because they have it, and then they list off a bunch of the languages that, of what it mean, what they say for it, which is great because it means that everyone for the color orange, unlike a lot of other things, it kind of is a universal color in a sense, because a lot of other colors have been so broken apart because of language barriers.
Right.
Whereas this one, because it's based off of something everyone knew, that color stands out more.
Yeah. I do think, though, that even amongst ourselves, this article is very identifies people who are like, love the pigment, love color, this is like incredible, and instead of like, it's a color, okay.
Well, so I'll say that. I think that in general we take advantage of color. I love the color. Like, I think that we take advantage of of color, like, because from an early age, like, you get to use crayons and you get to have all these like pigments. But like, if you think back on like the history of like pigment and paint making and all like that kind of stuff, like every single color has an extreme beautiful history to it. That like silk or like tea, like coffee, like they were slowly opened up to the world like via trade routes and like the expansion of like human civilization. And so to like look and invoke that history, I think it's so wonderful. It's like the reason why like Mary Magdalene's pictured in blue is because of lapis lazuli being so expensive for paint, or the reason why a lot of royalty wear purple is because of the what are they called? The shells that we
these shells,
it's a plant. It's an animal. Mollusk shell type thing, and so like you get the purple pigment from that, and it's like that is like a 7-day process to get just the pigment,
so you
and then
must
to
have
make
money if you have that.
to like make the color. Like being an artist back in the day wasn't just about being able to draw something, but it was about being able to create the pigments you needed to make the image come alive.
Because a lot of times they were making their own.
Exactly.
They weren't just buying it.
No, you had to make everything, even the paper.
In the like when the Egyptians were using, they were using from mineral relgar, which was toxic. It has arsenic in it.
Yeah.
And they were painting.
They didn't know that at the time.
No.
And then it says the Chinese used that same material to repel snakes, and in their medicine,
and medicine too.
because that was the only thing they had to really make that color.
Well, and then going to like reaction, like human reaction to color and that color theory and like how that evokes emotion, I think is always fascinating too. And like talking about how we use like orange for safety equipment, but also like it is a very like bright color that you find in nature that can seem almost unnatural. Like I think to like those beautiful trees we saw in China.
Yeah.
Where the leaves were all like orange and yellow, and they were just like kept falling. Were they ginkgo trees, right?
I think
they were stunning. The color was so absolutely
and
like
continuously falling the whole time.
Beautiful.
When you think about the psychology of it too, like there are so many studies that are like, if you want to create this type of room for like XY profession or whatever, like these are the colors that you might want to consider because like this would be best in like a childhood environment.
Right.
Or like orange and yellow is great for kitchens because it like evokes like a lot of energy, and that's where a lot of energy is spent in the house. Like I think it's really cool.
Well, and it's really, what I think is interesting. We've talked about blue and orange, and they actually complement each other across the spectrum in unique ways. And then they also talked about Van Gogh when we talked about how artists had to do it. Van Gogh became very famous because he would mix his own orange hues and use them to contrast his different blues and purples, which is why his paintings were so vivid and so eye-catching as you view them.
We literally just did this in painting class earlier.
All of my undergrads' football team's rivals were orange and another color, so I just have a disdain for the color orange.
I understand that. I've for another reason I would now.
But it's
Do
also
you
like
want to finish this off then? We can.
Oh.
I think we can get this in. I think we can do it.
Yeah,
Okay, so to summarize it, I think the actor's name, his last name is Ribeiro. I can't.
What's
Carlton.
Carlton.
Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is suing Fortnite because Fortnite used the Carlton dance or a version of it, and so he was trying to get the dance copyrighted so that he could, because. Yeah, but essentially they said no, you can't do it. It is like special choreography, but you can't do it. Yeah, but it's like
I feel like
Fortnite dances.
I think it's
Fortnite dances are just ridiculous.
But I think it's also the continuation of copyright issues and copyright laws that are being currently massaged and changed in a lot of ways, especially around choreography. Because there's an article a few months ago about choreography being copyright written and stuff like that.
Well, then they tried to use the excuse because he did it on ABC, so they were like, "Oh, well, at that point, is it the choreographers who choreographed it then,
or
like
the property?"
And so it's funny. I just think it's interesting considering how popular the Fortnite dances have
Yep.
become, and it's like how you see them everywhere.
It's a
and
craze.
so now it's like,
Right.
all right, how specific are we getting here? But
All right. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Have a wonderful week till next week. Lots of
week.
weeks. Right. Bye.
See ya.